first of all, I just want to applaud you because I have been screaming the name Hazel Scott for like decades.
Oh,
And when
wow.
I found out that you did a piece on her, I was so excited and I watched it and it was lovely. And I learned some things about her that I didn't know. That brings me into this question. You seem to gravitate toward things that are steeped in our history. And I'm wondering, what is it about our history that makes you go, you know what, I'm gonna reach back and grab this person, or I'm gonna reach back and grab this subject and put a spotlight on it so that people don't forget.
Well, Black history is American history. It's everybody's history, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And it's still crazy that's 2025 that we still have to kind of remind people of that. but but yes, I mean, these are the stories that attract me. They're part of my history, and I'm actually intellectually as curious about the topics that I work on, as much as the viewers that I'm hoping to reach. So it's nothing. I can't say there's a film that I've worked on that I wasn't deeply interested in the
But
subject.
why do you think funk is so hard to identify? Do you think it's more of an attitude or a feeling?
It is more of an attitude and a feeling, and we find that it means different things to different people. And I think Todd Boyd says it really great in the film. It's like you might not be able to define what it is, but you know what it isn't.
I love that. That's true. That is
I think
definitely
more than
true.
anything, we as Black people, we know what it isn't.
That is true. That is true. And I also loved about hearing, because I'm a musician vocally. So I loved hearing from people like Marcus Miller about when they start talking about James Brown, how the downbeat was on the one for anything that dealt with a bass line or a guitar line. It was like dun 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 dun. Dun. Like I loved hearing that. I think innately I knew that, but hearing somebody say it was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense, because you even when you're dancing to that music, you kind of dip into the one, not the two, three, and four, but you dip into the one. I love that. What did funk mean to you before this project, and what does it mean to you now?
Before, I guess when I think about funk as like a thing, before it meant to me my older sisters. I had older sisters who were Parliament Funkadelic fans. They brought home those first Prince records, and I was a little kid and seeing those things, I was just like, and the record covers. Oh, my parents had Ohio Players record covers and the boobies on the covers and things like that. I was just fascinated by this music. We had a Jimmy Castor Bunch record growing
Oh
up.
no, not the Jimmy Castor bunch.
Jimmy Castor, the Bertha Butt Boogie, I was obsessed with, and you don't know how hard I tried to work it into the film, but it didn't work. But these things, funk meant like this world that I was trying to get to, that when I would be older, that I would have access to. But as a kid, I didn't realize I was living in it already.
Mm,
Like I
yeah.
said, it's like I loved to dance when I was a kid. It's just something I knew that made me feel good, made me want to move, and it stayed with me the rest of my life.
How did you and Stanley end up collabing on this project?
We had actually worked on a Miles Davis documentary 5 years ago that came out for American Masters. And at the after party where it premiered at Sundance, we had the after party, and our co-producer at the time wanted just like, oh, this is a great experience. What should the next film be? And Stanley floated the idea of funk because we were, the Miles Davis experience. I think we had a band playing at the party that was a funk band essentially, and there was blaring, people were having a good time, and Stanley just thought of off the top of his head funk, and I was like, well, if that's going to be the next one, call me.
I love that. I love that. Now, you mentioned who your sister's favorite artists were and how you were trying to work in Jimmy Castor. But was Jimmy Castor your favorite funk artist?
Say my favorite. I never had a favorite. You're never going to pin me to a favorite. But but there were so many. I loved Jimmy Castor Bunch. I loved Parliament Funkadelic. I loved the Commodores and Earth, Wind and Fire. There were just those couple Ohio Players band, the Isley Brothers. There were so many bands. There was just so much music that I didn't really think of it as like one thing.
Yeah. Did you have at any time during this process, did you have a revelation about funk and the origins and where it is now, how it kind of bled into hip hop during the process of making this film?
Yeah, those are all things that I knew. But the revelations, I think, came through the interview process, like Donnie Simpson mentioning Elton John out of nowhere, and then interviewing Kirk Franklin, and him also mentioning Elton John out of nowhere. That kind of thing. So like those kind of relationships, I wouldn't have necessarily made on my own. Of course, I would have thought, that's a funky record, but that's not a particular one that really I had considered. Fame, absolutely. Once in a lifetime, absolutely. That was a given from the beginning that we knew that we were going to talk about this song. But but yeah, those kinds of things that you discover in the process of making the film, those are like some of the most precious. And then Carlos Alomar talking about working with James Brown and David Bowie, it was just great. And Fred Wesley, that's my heart.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments too. Carlos talking about talking about how he got. First of all, let's talk about how he talked about how he got fired by James Brown because he couldn't get that groove right. Because you heard a lot of times over the years that James did not tolerate people in the band messing up. I remember Deborah Draper, I spoke to her. She did a documentary about James Brown, and she spoke about that same thing about how when it came to his musicians, he did not tolerate people not getting in that groove. So to hear Carlos give a firsthand, account of what that was pure comedy for me. And also to hear George Clinton kind of talk about how he's like, yeah, I took this from this person. And it's funny how everybody kind of quote unquote borrowed, some kind of downbeat or some kind of groove or some kind of note from one another in order to create their own sound. And when you really go back and listen to it, because what this made me do is it made me go back and listen to it. Because I have a box set, a collector's box set of Parliament Funkadelic. So I went back downstairs and listened to Flashlight and listened to We Got the Funk and listened to some of these other songs just so I could hear the groove that they were talking about so I could prepare to talk to you today. And I'm really glad that I did. This has been so much fun talking to you, Nicole. What do you have coming up next?
Well, I'm just pretty much working on finishing up the paperwork on these two films. Hazel is more finished than this one, but there's just like little last minute things, and then looking forward to what the next thing will be. This will take a lot of time for the next few months, though.
Yeah, well, I hope whatever you work on next that you'll come back and talk to me about it so that we can kiki and have a good little conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.